A few weeks ago, on a regular Thursday morning, I was going through our usual hectic routine, getting the kids ready for school. It was 7:30, and suddenly, the loud ringing of the phone cut through the chaos. I couldn't help but wonder who could be calling so early. The caller ID showed a strange area code, which only made me more curious. "Hello," I answered, cautiously pressing the phone to my ear. To my surprise, it was Emily, my wife. We had spoken just the night before, so I was puzzled about why she'd be calling again. Emily works for a small marketing firm, and her call immediately caught my attention. I handle the kids and work from home, while she's out and about all the time, working at a printing company in the city. Even though our schedules are completely different, it somehow worked for us. We made a decent living, had a nice 4-bedroom house in the suburbs with a pool, and a good group of friends. But something about this call didn't sit right. She quickly explained that last night, while she was in the hotel lobby picking up a newspaper, someone stole her purse. "You need to cancel all our credit cards right away," she said, sounding a bit panicked. "I've already informed Lily, my boss, and she's arranging for new American Express cards to be sent overnight. She's also transferring me some money to get by until I come back tomorrow." I was surprised, especially since Emily is usually so careful with her stuff. "How did that happen?" I asked, trying to understand the situation. She sighed and said, "I got distracted and left my purse on the cashier's counter when I went to grab something else to read. When I came back, it was gone. The cashier said she was busy with another customer and didn't see anything. My driver's license was in there too, but the hotel staff are checking the dumpsters nearby. Hopefully they find it, otherwise I'll need to take taxis for my meetings today." "Don't worry, I'll cancel the cards right now," I replied, still processing what she was telling me. "At least you only had $1,200 in cash in there. We'll replace the other cards later. As long as you've still got your makeup in the room, you're good for the presentation tomorrow." She shifted the conversation, asking, "How are the kids? I miss being home with all of you." There was something in her tone that made me wonder if she was feeling guilty about something, but I had no idea just how deep it went. Fast forward to about 6 weeks later, after we had canceled the cards and moved on from the purse incident. Life had settled back into its usual routine. But today, something else came up that changed everything. While I was going through some paperwork looking for our home insurance, I stumbled across a folder containing Emily's Fidelity account statements. This is the account she manages for the inheritance she got after her parents passed away in that tragic accident a few years ago. Normally, I respect her privacy when it comes to that account, but curiosity got the better of me, so I took a peek. I knew she had inherited around $350,000, but to my surprise, the account had grown to over $400,000. As I flipped through the statements, one transaction stood out: a $3,000 withdrawal from the money market account around 6 weeks ago, right after her purse went missing. My mind raced as I tried to figure out what she could have spent that money on. Digging deeper, I found that she had written a check to a local jewelry store just days after her purse was stolen. I was completely caught off guard. She hadn't mentioned buying anything, let alone spending that kind of money on jewelry. And it wasn't for me, that much I knew. She does have a brother, but I couldn't imagine why she'd spend $3,000 on him. Feeling uneasy, I went online, found the jewelry store's phone number, and decided to call them. A woman answered, and I explained that I needed some details about a recent purchase. I mentioned that we were having an issue and asked about a warranty. She pulled up the transaction and quickly remembered it. "Oh, yes, I remember your wife," the woman said. She came in very upset, said her wedding and engagement rings had been stolen, and she wanted to replace them. We spent a lot of time finding something suitable for her. She used a company credit card as collateral and later sent a check to pay the balance. My heart sank. Emily had never once mentioned her wedding and engagement rings being stolen. All she told me was that her purse had been taken. I was completely blindsided by this revelation. "Thank you for the information," I said, trying to stay calm. "I need to talk to my wife before making any decisions. I'll call you back." The woman seemed confused, but nowhere near as confused as I was. None of this made sense. The more I thought about it, the more unsettling it became. Something wasn't adding up, and I had a feeling I was about to find out exactly what was going on. It was becoming increasingly clear that the rings should have been in her purse when it was stolen. But the question that gnawed at me was, why would she be carrying them in her purse at all? If she had no reason to hide her marital status, why not wear them? To my knowledge, there weren't any professional reasons for her to pretend she wasn't married. But if she wanted to appear single in certain situations, my mind started to race with unsettling possibilities, suggesting that maybe she was considering an affair while she was away. Just the thought of it made me sick to my stomach. We'd been married for 11 years and had two amazing kids, Daniel, who's 7, and Samantha, who's 6. I thought we had a great marriage and what felt like a perfect family. I was content in our life together, or at least I thought I was. Emily traveled once a month for work, usually for 2 or 3 nights, staying in different cities. If she had any intention of cheating, those trips would be the perfect opportunity to do it under the radar. Losing the rings must have upset her enough to go out and replace them with ones that looked almost identical to the originals. I remember buying those rings on a modest budget, so replacing them wouldn't have been too expensive, but why hadn't she just filed a claim with the insurance company? Probably because I would have found out. If her purse was genuinely stolen at the hotel, she should have reported it to the police, but she never mentioned doing that. I started wondering what she had told the hotel staff. So I decided to look up the hotel's phone number and give them a call. I asked if there was any record of my wife's purse being stolen. To my surprise, they said there was a written report on file. I requested a copy, and not long after, I received a faxed copy of the statement, which was written and signed by Emily herself. In her report, Emily claimed that her purse was stolen while she was dancing in the hotel's hall. She had left her purse at the booth she was sitting at, and when she came back, it was gone. What really threw me, though, was the part where she explicitly stated she didn't want to involve the police. That sent alarm bells ringing in my head. As I read the report, my mind spun with the implications. Emily had lied to me, not only about the rings, but now it seemed she had even fabricated part of the story about her purse being stolen. I couldn't come up with any other explanation that didn't lead to the disturbing conclusion that something was seriously wrong. One thing became clearer. Those rings had been in her purse when she was dancing with some stranger. It had been several weeks since the incident, and she was preparing for another trip in a few days. I knew I needed to learn more about her upcoming schedule and try to figure out what she was really doing during these trips. If she had been unfaithful, maybe losing the rings was some sort of wake-up call for her to reconsider her actions. If I did discover she'd been cheating, I knew it would be the end of our marriage. But what scared me more was how this could affect our children. Emily might not be the wife I thought she was, but she was still a great mother. The idea of her getting custody, especially with her frequent business trips, was unbearable to me. I had to know more about what was really going on to see if there were any clues that pointed to what she was doing when she wasn't at home. Was she being reckless, sleeping around without protection? I figured she'd be careful, especially since I'd had a vasectomy after Samantha was born. There was no way she'd want to risk an unwanted pregnancy or bring anything back home. But where would she keep her contraceptives? She wouldn't hide them in the house or the car. It seemed most likely that she kept them at her office or took them along on her trips. She usually carried her work stuff, papers, laptop, and presentation materials, in a large briefcase that she stored in her office. If her trip involved an early flight, she would bring it home the night before and pack it in her suitcase for the airport. I knew I needed a chance to search that briefcase before she left for her next trip. With any luck, she'd have an early morning flight this time. I decided to stay calm and act as though nothing was wrong, hoping she wouldn't pick up on anything unusual. Later that day, the kids came home from school, and I found myself caught up in the usual household tasks. I didn't have much time to dwell on my suspicions, but the thoughts never fully left my mind. When Emily came home from work, I was in the middle of cleaning up a mess I had made while preparing dinner. I had dropped a dish of beans, and the kitchen was a disaster. Between cleaning that up and keeping the kids occupied, I looked a bit flustered, but luckily she didn't seem to notice anything off with me. After things settled down, I greeted her with a kiss on the cheek, and we sat down for dinner as we usually did. The conversation was casual, and I didn't want to raise any red flags by acting suspicious. "So, you're heading out on another trip soon?" I asked casually. "Yeah," she replied, sounding unenthusiastic. "Same old routine. I'm not exactly looking forward to it." My curiosity spiked, but I kept my tone neutral as I tried to gather more details. Have you ever thought about applying for a different role if you don't enjoy it? I asked, keeping my tone light, but genuinely curious. You've been with the company for a long time now, and you know the ins and outs. I'm sure you could handle just about any position they offered you. Emily shrugged, mentioning how she wanted more experience before settling into a desk job. I took the opportunity to gently appeal to her conscience, hoping to hit a nerve. I really miss you when you're not home, especially with the kids. It's hard for them too. She sighed, her voice soft. I know, I'm sorry. I miss you all too, she said, sounding sympathetic but distant. Trying to gather more information, I pressed on. So, where are you headed this time? Are you leaving in the morning? Maybe we could spend some time together before you go. I tried to keep my tone casual, but I could feel the anxiety creeping in. My stomach churned, making it hard to eat. I noticed that Emily didn't seem to be enjoying her meal much either. Whether it was because she was distracted or feeling something similar to what I was, I couldn't tell. She answered, I'm just going to Denton. I'll be leaving tomorrow morning around 7:30, she said before adding with a playful wink, I'll need something to keep me going until I'm back on Friday. I responded in kind, trying to act like everything was normal. To my surprise, she blushed a little. Her casual attitude about the trip made it seem like she didn't suspect anything unusual, which left me wondering. Had she been hiding things all along, or was I just paranoid? Either way, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to check her briefcase. The night before her trip, Emily came home in high spirits, parking her car next to mine in the garage. She seemed unusually upbeat, which made me wonder what was behind her mood. Was it our earlier conversation or something else entirely? When she came inside, I noticed she didn't bring her briefcase with her, which likely meant it was still in the car. As I prepared dinner, she casually asked me to grab her suitcase from the garage once we were done eating. Sure, I replied, keeping my tone light, even though my mind was racing with suspicion. Are you all set for the trip? She smiled. Yeah, it's just a routine trip. My briefcase is in the car. I just need to pack an overnight bag with the essentials. Do you have any plans while you're away? I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. Not really, just the usual work stuff. But we should plan something fun for the weekend when I get back, she replied, seemingly enthusiastic about the idea. Sounds like a plan. I agreed, trying to keep up the pretense of everything being fine. After dinner, we cleaned up together, and she headed to the bedroom to pack while I made my way to the garage to fetch her suitcase. When I checked the car, I couldn't find her briefcase in the front seats, which led me to believe it was in the trunk. I had already planned to search it later that night, but first I needed the keys. So I headed back inside with her suitcase and casually asked, Do you know where the car keys are? My tire seems to be losing air, and I want to take it to Tom's shop to get it fixed before it becomes an issue. For a moment, she looked confused, then reached in her purse and handed me the keys. Couldn't you just use the spare tire? She suggested. It's meant for emergencies, right? I shook my head, maintaining my calm. Yeah, but we got time to do it properly. I'd rather get it fixed now than risk something happening later. With that, I left for Tom's station. As soon as I arrived, I honked, and Tom came out to open the bay door, waving me in. What's up, man? He asked. I hesitated for a second before responding. I'm supposed to be getting my tire checked, but I need to check something else first. Tom raised an eyebrow, but didn't press. He's the kind of guy who knows when to stay out of things. I opened the trunk and pulled out Emily's briefcase, setting it on the workbench. My hands were shaking as I unlocked it. Inside, I rifled through her papers, trying not to disturb anything too obviously. Then, tucked away in one of the side pockets, I found an open package of contraceptives. There were a few missing. My heart sank. My worst fears were staring me in the face. The signs I'd been ignoring, the gut feelings I'd been dismissing, all of it was now confirmed. I carefully put everything back the way it was and closed the briefcase, returning it to the trunk. Just as I finished, Tom walked back over. Did you find what you were looking for? He asked, giving me a look of concern. I'm afraid so, I said quietly, my voice full of a sadness I hadn't allowed myself to feel until now. Mind if I hang out here a bit longer? Maybe check the tire pressure. Pretend that's what I was really doing here. Tom didn't say anything, just nodded and went to work on the tire. He knew me well enough to know when not to ask questions. As he worked, I leaned against the wall, trying to process everything. What I had found in Emily's briefcase was enough to shatter whatever trust one had left. I filled up the gas tank, not sure when or if I'd ever do that for her again. My mind was filled with gratitude toward Tom for his understanding as I drove back home. But as I pulled into the garage, a sense of darkness crept over me, and panic started building in my chest. Anger and frustration churned inside me. How could she do this? Betray not just me, but our kids and everything we'd built together? It was hard to grasp, but as the emotions started to settle, I shifted my focus to what needed to happen next. If I was going to secure custody of the kids, I needed solid proof of her infidelity. As much as she had failed me as a partner, I knew she was still a good mother. The children deserved to have her in their lives, even if it was just through visitation. But my goal was clear. I wanted full legal custody. She'd have to explain the reason for our divorce to her brother and our friends. They would see her for who she really was. When I walked into the house, I called out from the bedroom. Everything's set. Just a minor issue with a nail. Okay, thanks, she replied, barely looking at me. Needing a moment to gather myself, I headed to the kitchen for a beer and joined the kids in the family room while they were watching TV. I sat there, watching them, knowing how much this would change their lives. About half an hour later, Emily came into the room and sat down next to me on the couch. My emotions had calmed by then, but a deep sadness replaced the anger. I realized that the family I once thought was perfect was about to be shattered. To my surprise, Emily leaned closer and snuggled up to me, whispering in my ear, "Are you ready for tonight?" I took a sip of my beer and replied, "I think so, but my stomach's bothering me." "Oh, that's too bad, honey," she said, sounding sympathetic. She wrapped her arms around me and softly said, "I love you." I instinctively put my arm around her, wrestling with the swirl of emotions. Even after her betrayal, there was still this sliver of affection left, but the trust was shattered. I kept asking myself, why did she do it? Was it for excitement? Or did she need something from someone else that I couldn't give her? I might never know, but the damage had been done. We put the kids to bed together, as we always did, and I watched as she kissed them goodnight. It hurt knowing that by morning, she'd be gone again. The kids were used to her travels, so they didn't seem too unsettled, but I couldn't shake the feeling that soon, everything would change for them too. That night, we made love, but it felt hollow, lacking the usual connection. She must have sensed something was off because afterwards she asked, "Is your stomach still bothering you?" "Yeah," I replied, nodding. "But I'll be okay." Desperate to see if there was any chance of saving what we had, I asked, "Do you really need to go on this trip?" I wished deep down that she would say no, that maybe all of this was just a bad dream. She sighed apologetically. "I'm sorry, honey. I have to go. I'll try to wrap things up quickly and be back by Friday. I'm really looking forward to the weekend with you and the kids." With a heavy heart, I said, "All right, you should get some sleep. You got an early flight. I'll take a shower now, so I don't have to worry about it in the morning." She nodded and went to shower, and I, unable to resist the urge, went over to her suitcase. I knew I shouldn't, but I needed to see what she had packed. At first, it was all business attire, nothing unusual. But as I dug a little deeper, I found some of her sexiest lingerie and that little black dress she always looked amazing in. The kind of outfit you don't wear for just a business dinner. My heart sank even further. I carefully put everything back and returned to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. I lay awake, listening to her move around at 5 in the morning, knowing I wouldn't say goodbye this time. As she got ready, she came over and kissed me on the cheek. "Still not feeling well?" she asked softly. I nodded, unable to find the words. The sound of the garage door closing behind her was the final note of our marriage as I had known it. Once she was gone, I dragged myself out of bed and into the shower, bracing myself for the day ahead. After seeing the kids off to school, I had breakfast and sat down with the phone book, looking for a private investigator. I called several agencies until I found one with a branch in Denton, where Emily was headed. I made arrangements for them to start surveillance that very evening, providing them with all the details they needed: her photo, her travel itinerary, and the specific location of her meetings. They assured me they'd collect as much information as possible, including photos, and would send me a full report by Monday. With that taken care of, I knew the next step was to find a divorce lawyer. A friend had once recommended one, so I dug up his contact information and scheduled an appointment for later that afternoon. When I met with him, he explained that our state was a no-fault divorce state, meaning no blame needed to be assigned. Given that I was the primary caregiver for the children, he was confident I'd be granted custody, though Emily would still have visitation rights. The lawyer also walked me through the division of property. Everything would be split 50-50, but alimony wasn't necessary since we made similar incomes. However, Emily would be required to pay child support, given that I'd have custody. As for her inheritance, it wouldn't be touched. That wasn't my concern anyway. All I wanted was to protect the kids and move forward. I instructed him to prepare the necessary documents, requesting that Emily move out of the house immediately after the divorce was finalized. The house would eventually be sold once the kids turned 18, and the proceeds would be split between us. As I left the lawyer's office, I felt a strange sense of closure. Life would go on for me and the kids. Emily would have to deal with the consequences of her choices, and I would move forward, focusing on rebuilding my life. At that moment, I didn't take any immediate action regarding our finances, insurance, or other legal matters. I figured I'd have enough time to deal with those details after I served her the divorce papers. Given her inheritance, I assumed she wouldn't be concerned about her share of our joint savings. When it was time to pick the kids up from school, I drove home and waited by the bus stop, my mind racing with everything that had transpired. On Friday afternoon, when Emily returned home, I made a casual offer to take care of her laundry. She politely declined, saying she'd handle it later. I couldn't help but smirk to myself, knowing exactly why she insisted on doing her own laundry. It was all part of her effort to keep her secrets hidden. Later that evening, as we lay in bed, she expressed concern over my persistent stomach issues, urging me to see a doctor. "This has been going on too long," she said, her voice full of worry. I brushed it off playfully, telling her I'd try a new medication a friend had recommended. "Hopefully, it'll do the trick and bring me back to normal soon," I added, trying to keep the conversation light. She pulled me closer and whispered that she missed me. The gesture stirred up a mix of emotions in me. How could she say that after everything she'd done? Yet, despite her betrayal, part of me still felt something for her. I couldn't help but wonder why she'd strayed. Was she looking for excitement? Something more than I could offer? Whatever the reason, the trust we'd once shared was broken beyond repair. On Monday morning, after the kids left for school and Emily headed to work, I received a call from the detective agency. They told me they had the report ready, so I said I'd be there shortly. Within half an hour, I found myself sitting with the office manager, going over the details. He mentioned that the report, along with attached photos, had been faxed over from Denton that morning. He hadn't had time to go through it thoroughly, but said the evidence seemed damning. I took a copy of the report and started reading. The subject was listed as Emily Carter, and the surveillance began at 5:17 p.m. on Wednesday, June 16th, at the Denton Marriott Hotel. Her identity had been confirmed through a company badge she was wearing and by comparing her photo from their records. She had checked into room 414, and at that time, she was alone. The report included a photo labeled Exhibit 1A, showing Emily in professional attire before entering her room. Notably, she was still wearing her wedding rings in this photo, which had clearly been taken discreetly. The surveillance continued, and at 6:31 p.m., Emily left her room dressed in a black cocktail dress and high heels, an outfit that immediately stood out to me. She had paired the dress with the necklace I had given her for our 10th anniversary, but the wedding rings were gone. The next photo, Exhibit 1B, captured her standing in the hotel lobby, clearly ringless. My heart sank. Then came Exhibit 1D, a photo of Emily seated in a booth at a restaurant, locked in a passionate kiss with a man I didn't recognize. The intimacy between them was undeniable. The report noted that at 8:51 p.m., Emily and this man left the restaurant together, took the elevator up to her floor, and entered her room. Exhibit 1E showed them walking into room 414. Emily looked slightly intoxicated, but the smile on her face revealed she was more than pleased with how her evening had turned out. At 11:13 p.m., the man exited her room and left the hotel. The report identified him as Nathan R. Evans, a married man with 2 young children. As I read further, I realized this wasn't an isolated incident. Emily had repeated the same behavior the following night with a different man. The investigator had documented everything, and the details were crushing. My wife wasn't just having a single affair. She was leading a double life, indulging in a series of infidelities during her trips away from home. The wedding ring she had supposedly lost hadn't stopped her from acting recklessly. After settling the bill with the private investigator, I took 2 additional copies of the report, which had also been saved onto a CD for safekeeping. I left the office feeling numb, but determined. Once I got back home, I called my divorce attorney without delay. When I asked about the status of the papers, he confirmed that they were ready for filing. Without hesitation, I instructed him to proceed and specifically requested that the divorce papers be served to her at her workplace the following day. I wanted it to be public. She would have to face the consequences of her betrayal, and there would be no hiding this from anyone. The attorney assured me that serving Emily the divorce papers at her workplace could be done smoothly and asked for her office address, which I gave without hesitation. I knew exactly what I was doing. Handing her the papers in public wasn't just about ending our marriage. It was about serving justice for what she had done. I wanted her to feel the shame and humiliation I had felt. That night, there was no warmth between us. Emily seemed to sense that something was off, though she didn't directly voice it. Instead, she just expressed concern over my health, telling me she hoped I would feel better soon. There was a strange distance in her, but I didn't address it. I had already moved past caring about her feelings. The next morning, I got up early after barely any sleep. I busied myself with work on the computer until the kids started waking up. Then I went to the kitchen to make breakfast. As usual, I said goodbye to Emily before she left for work. She came in for a hug and kiss, but I gave her a half-hearted embrace, playfully encouraging her to leave quickly. I could tell she sensed something was wrong, perhaps even guessing what was about to happen. When I closed the door behind her, I noticed her eyes were filled with tears as she whispered, "I love you." After she left, an overwhelming sadness washed over me. I had to fight back tears, but I composed myself quickly. There was no time to break down with the kids around. They needed me to get them ready for the school bus. Around 10:45 a.m., the phone rang. The caller ID showed Emily's office. I answered without saying a word. After a brief pause, I heard her shaky voice. In a whisper, she said, "I'm sorry," before the line went dead. I didn't respond. I couldn't. That night, Emily didn't come home. I wondered if she was still playing her deceitful games, pretending I didn't matter anymore. My anger was justified, but as I sat alone with my thoughts, I questioned if I had been too harsh. The kids, confused and upset by their mom's absence, kept asking where she was. Trying to lift their spirits, I took them to McDonald's for dinner. They were tired by the time we got home, so they went straight to bed. The next morning, Emily called. "Honey, can I come home to pack my things?" "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice wavering. For a brief moment, I felt a twinge of guilt, but it quickly faded. I replied calmly, "Why don't you come between 9 and noon? The kids, and I won't be here." I made it clear that we could only talk after she signed, notarized, and returned the divorce documents. Then, and only then, would I listen to whatever she had to say. There was a sob on the other end before she replied, "Okay." The call ended shortly after. In the end, she signed the divorce papers, and 6 months later, our marriage was officially over. During that time, I found out she had become pregnant from her affair. She had tried to keep it hidden from her lover, but her contraception failed. The truth would have come out eventually, even if I hadn't found out about her infidelity through the lost rings. Rumors started circulating that she was dating again, and I wondered if I should warn her new partner about her unfaithfulness. Part of me wanted to, but I decided it wasn't my place to get involved in her future relationships. When we met at my lawyer's office to finalize the divorce, Emily pleaded with me to reconsider. She talked about how much she missed having full access to the kids. She told me she'd been seeing a psychologist who diagnosed her with nymphomania, claiming that her impulses were under control now. But it didn't matter to me anymore. I told her that even if she had gotten help, the fact that she didn't do it sooner was the problem. She should have taken responsibility before things spiraled out of control. As I left the lawyer's office, Emily was still crying. I had no sympathy left, She had made her choices. Recently, I reconnected with an old school friend who works at a nightclub. He told me he'd seen Emily there on several weekends, always with different men, behaving provocatively. It hurt me to think that my kids had such an irresponsible mother, and it seemed like she hadn't truly recovered from her issues. A mutual friend of Emily's even called me one day to tell me she was in poor health. Apparently, she had contracted herpes, yet she was still living the same promiscuous lifestyle. I felt sorry for her, but I made it clear that I couldn't help her. She had chosen this path, and the consequences were hers to deal with. Meanwhile, I started dating again and found someone special. She's about my age, divorced as well, and had discovered her ex-husband's infidelity, just like I did. She didn't tolerate dishonesty, and I admired her strength and resilience. My kids seem to like her, and I feel hopeful about the future. This new relationship feels like a natural progression, and I believe it's only a matter of time before we take things to the next level. For the first time in a long while, I feel like life is moving in a positive direction.